At 7:46 p.m. on July 31st, the port of Pozzuoli closed on a summer evening. The quay did not flood, it had risen. Since 2005, the ground under Rioni Terra has lifted more than 140 centimeters, about 4 feet. It is still climbing at roughly 10 millimeters a month. That is 2 stacked coins every 30 days, a brick every 3 months, a child's height in 20 years. A harbor cannot work when its floor rises like dough. This one no longer does in places where the water is now too shallow for ferries. Doorsteps that were level now tilt, pipes bend, walls hairline where they did not before. The quake that forced the closure was only magnitude 4.7, shallow at about 3 kilometers, which is a 20-minute walk straight down. It was the strongest shock recorded in this caldera in 40 years, and it beat the previous record by just 1/10. Both facts are true together, and that pairing is the thread to pull. If a harbor can rise 4 feet without anyone noticing the water, what else has risen with it that you have not yet seen? That question carries the next 2 years. For 20 years before 2005, the caldera sank. After the crisis of 1982 to 1984, the ground settled by about 90 centimeters. That erased almost half the lift that had forced 40,000 people out of Pozzuoli's center in October 1983. The harbor deepened again, and the graph went flat. People rebuilt and forgot, then the line turned. At the GNSS antenna on Rioni Terra, known as Right, the weekly points began to climb at roughly 4 centimeters a year, slower than fingernails grow. That pace did not hold. By January 2025, the total rise at Right stood at about 1.4 meters, more than a yardstick and a half. By April 2025, it was about 145 centimeters. By September 2025, it had passed 150 centimeters, taller than a 10-year-old child, added under streets and pipes. The shape is radial, with the maximum at Pozzuoli and a smooth fall with distance. That points to pressure under the center, southeast of Rioni Terra. The speed shifts are concrete enough to repeat. In the last months of 2024, the rate sat at about 10 millimeters a month. In spring 2024, it had surged to 20 to 30 millimeters a month, roughly an inch. Then it eased, and by late 2025 and into early 2026, it steadied near 10 millimeters again, about 12 centimeters a year. That is a brick every 3 months under every road. The right numbers make it physical. From January 2024 to October 2025, the station logged about 35 centimeters, a school ruler plus a hand width in under 2 years. From January 2025 onward, it added roughly 24 centimeters, close to a large pizza box stacked. The ground never jumps, it creeps, and creep lets people stay until the rock cracks. The cracks are earthquakes. With standard picking, the network found about 12,000 events between 2022 and mid-2025. With the new automated picking, it found about 54,000, roughly 4 times more. Most were too small to feel, yet each one marked the rock giving way a millimeter at a time. If creep is slow, why did the count quadruple while the lift added only centimeters? That mismatch is the first hint that pressure is not pushing where you imagine. Keep that hint in mind. Put your hand on stone that remembers this before any gauge did. In Pozzuoli, the Roman market, long called the Temple of Serapis, stands with 3 marble columns that still hold the roofline. High on those columns, about 6 meters up, the marble is pitted with neat round holes. Those holes are not tool marks. They are borings left by lithophaga, marine bivalves that live only under seawater. The animals drilled while the columns stood upright under the sea. So the market sank below sea level, stayed standing, and then rose again above the water. Early geologists argued over that band until the meaning settled. It gave the process its name, bradyseism, slow ground movement without a single large quake. Charles Lyell put those columns on the frontispiece of his Principles of Geology in 1830. He showed 3 pillars with a dark band of holes to argue that the Earth moves gradually and that present causes explain past changes. That image makes the past physical, and it reframes the present lift as a repeat. Go back far enough and the scale dwarfs the harbor. About 39,000 years ago, the Campanian ignimbrite erupted, burying 2/3 of Campania in tuff. It spread ash more than 2,500 kilometers to Russia, which is like dusting half a continent from one bay. About 15,000 years ago, the Neapolitan yellow tuff followed and built the second nested caldera. Between those giants, there were many smaller events, and the last was Monte Nuovo in 1538. For weeks that autumn, the field smoked and swelled. On September 29th, the ground split and threw pumice and lava. It built a cinder cone 134 meters high in roughly a week. That is close to a 40-story building where there had been flat ground and a shoreline. Its volume was small, rated VEI 2, a firecracker beside the older blasts, yet it proves the cycle of swelling before and sinking after. Records show the ground sank from 1540 to 1582. Then it sank until at least 1650, which means the market that sank and rose has done so more than once. If stone can go under the sea and return upright, a harbor that gains 4 feet is not new, it is remembered. That memory is why the next record quake felt familiar before it became the biggest. Picture the last 2 years as a ladder, where each rung is a new record. On May 20th, 2024 at 1:25 a.m., a magnitude 4.4 struck about 2 kilometers deep. It tied the strongest shock in 40 years, felt across Naples and the Bay. On March 13, 2025, at 1:25 a.m., 2 shocks a few seconds apart, magnitudes 3.3 and 4.0, were measured together as duration magnitude 4.6. INGMV called that the strongest in the instrumental era, with an epicenter near Solfatara at about 3 kilometers, a walk straight down. On June 30, 2025, at 12:47 p.m., another 4.6 hit at almost 5 kilometers. That was the second time that number had been tied in 3 months, and officials reported no major damage while the weekly GPS still climbed. On July 31, 2026, at 7:46 p.m., the ladder broke with magnitude 4.7 near Solfatara at about 3 kilometers. That was the strongest ever recorded in this caldera, surpassing the 2 4.6 events in 2025. It hurt between 21 and 26 people, too seriously. Facades shed plaster, tough cliffs shed boulders onto cars, and shelves emptied inside shops. Each record beat the last by 1/10, and each headline repeated 40 years. That is not hype, but the length of good locations here. Beating it means more energy than any quake your parents felt in this bay. The swarms changed as well. Since 2021, burst-like swarms with very short times between events have accelerated, often dozens in hours. On July 31st, more than 30 aftershocks followed in hours, including a magnitude 3.8 at about 10 p.m. in the Gulf of Pozzuoli. In 24 hours, the swarm counted 189 shocks, which is 1 quake every 7 minutes through the night. The easy story writes itself from those numbers. Ground up, quakes up, bigger each spring. So magma must be rising, and for a while the data let you believe it. That belief is sensible and wrong in the same breath. Take the easy story and dress it and it fits. Magma rises and presses the roof. The roof lifts and the roof cracks, so you get uplift and quakes together. That looks exactly like Campi Flegrei since 2005, where 3 lines have moved together: ground up, quakes up, gas up. Carbon dioxide flux has risen. Fumaroles inside Solfatara sit near 160 degrees Celsius, with Boca Grande hissing at 164 degrees. That is hot enough to blister skin and to cook fish in steam, as guides once showed. The hydrothermal system has warmed, and the ratios of carbon monoxide to carbon dioxide shift when deeper gas arrives. So the 3 signals correlate and suggest one origin with many symptoms. Textbooks point to a shallow intrusion around 2012, and note that Civil Protection raised the alert from green to yellow in December 2012. Yellow means attention, the second of 4 levels, and it has held for 13 years, long enough for children to grow up on yellow. Then the language hardens. A 2023 paper led by Christopher Kilburn at University College London found progressive weakening of the cap rock that seals the system. He tracks rock failure, and the data show each uplift stretches the rock without full healing. So the next break comes easier. The window for a critical transition narrows to the next decade if trends continue. The swarm statistics look exponential since 2021, and the locations cluster rather than scatter. That is what you expect if a body inflates and the dome stays radial, centered near Pozzuoli harbor like dough pushed by a finger. The center is highest and the edges are lower, exactly what GPS shows. Add the counts. The network found 4 times more quakes with the new method, and the headline about exponential seismicity spreads fast. If you live in Naples and watch a harbor gain 4 feet, you watch the biggest quake each spring beat the last. You pack a mental bag. You check the dates: 1538 for Monte Nuovo, 15,000 for the yellow tuff, 39,000 for the ignimbrite, and you think do. That is sensible, and it is not what the best located quakes now show. Here is the objection said plain, and it is the right question. If the ground rose 4 feet, something big pushed it, and what else but magma pushes rock like that? Rock does not lift itself, so why pretend this is steam and brine? That question is fair, because something does push, but the push is not the balloon you picture. Picture 2 pushes. One is a balloon inflating, magma enters a chamber, the chamber swells, the roof lifts and quakes cluster above the balloon. The other is a cork in a bottle. A lid of sealed rock traps hot brine and gas. Heat rises from below, gas exsolves, pressure builds under the lid. The lid flexes up, water expands, and rock cracks around the edges. So quakes ring the lid. That second picture is what precise locations now show. A team led by Greg Barroza, geophysics professor at Stanford, ran an AI picker trained at Stanford. It read seismograms recorded by INGV at Campi Flegrei between 2022 and mid-2025. The standard catalog listed about 12,000 events in that window. The AI found about 54,000, roughly 4 times more, because small signals missed by the threshold were recovered and timed. When those were located with double difference methods, a shape appeared that was indistinct before. A thin, well-marked ring fault, about 7 miles across, consistent with the edge of the uplift, especially offshore. Live Science called it a clear ring fault that could host magnitude 5 quakes, and Stanford quoted Barroza that the structure was previously indistinct and now is thin and well-marked. The deeper seismicity traces a ring above inferred magma at about 5 kilometers, where a slow-velocity anomaly sits, likely mush. The quakes sit above that, mostly at 1 to 4 kilometers and most less than 3 kilometers, shallow enough to feel sharply, and they are offset from the center of maximum uplift rather than mirroring it, which a balloon would do. Models map a capped geothermal reservoir under Pozzuoli where mineral precipitation seals pores as temperature rises, trapping pressure until it leaks, then reseals, so the system breathes. Stresses from those fluids drive plug-like motion of the crust inside the caldera, the plug being the block centered on Pozzuoli that moves on the ring. Hydrothermal pressure lifts your street, not a rising dike, and the magma below supplies heat and gas without moving. Set the lift aside and stand on that night. At 7:46 p.m., the epicenter near Solfatara, at about 3 kilometers, sent a sharp jolt through Pozzuoli that cracked walls and dropped plaster onto pavements. A tough cliff above a car park gave way and rolled boulders onto cars and scooters. Power cut in blocks from Naples to Procida and Ischia. At about 10 p.m., a magnitude 3.8 aftershock hit the Gulf of Pozzuoli, and more than 30 shocks had already followed in hours, so people walked out with blankets and documents and did not go back. Civil protection counted between 21 and 26 injured, 2 seriously, and about 300 displaced in the first tally. That included occupants of 2 uninhabited buildings that partly collapsed. Families from about a dozen apartment blocks closed for checks, roughly 40 families, left until engineers cleared the structures. The night stretched with 189 shocks in 24 hours, which is 1 quake every 7 minutes through the night. That is the sort that keeps you from sleeping even when the walls hold. Families did not sleep inside. They slept in cars nose out, they pitched tents, and they waited in the civil protection assembly areas that the town had mapped years before. By morning, schools in Pozzuoli, Boccoli, and Bignoli stayed shut while inspectors moved house to house with clipboards. On the rails, both the Cumana and the Circumflegrei lines were suspended that night for safety checks. Those are the 2 lines that thread the caldera and tie Naples to Pozzuoli and beyond. Delays topped 6 hours across the network, while main hub services resumed overnight. The port of Pozzuoli closed for key checks, and ferries to Procida and Ischia diverted to Naples at the height of summer season. So a harbor that had risen 4 feet could not be used by the boats that would need it most. So what is the real risk? And here the skeptic is right to push back. If it is mostly brine and a sticky lid, why talk about a supervolcano at all when no one has seen lava, and no eruption is imminent? NGV says monitoring shows no magma on the move to the surface, and the alert stays at yellow. Yellow has held since December 2012, which is 13 years of yellow, long enough to finish school on yellow, and past lifts bigger than this did not end in eruption. From 1970 to 1972, the ground rose about 1.7 meters, about 5.5 feet, more than the current 4 feet, with no eruption. From 1982 to 1984, it rose about 1.85 meters, about 6 feet. In October 1983, 40,000 people left Pozzuoli. The largest quake then, magnitude 4.0 on October 4, 1983, hit intensity 7 within a kilometer and damaged buildings across the center. Yet there was no eruption when the uplift and quake stopped in December 1984. In 1538, the area showed decades of uplift before Monte Nuovo. Not every uplift repeats that end. Put that beside the other number that does not settle. The caldera is about 12 kilometers across, a shallow bowl you can drive across in 15 minutes and still not see. About 500,000 people live inside the red zone, the area for pyroclastic flows. Hot ash and gas at hundreds of degrees move at highway speed or faster, where the only protection is to leave before it starts. Another 300,000 to 500,000 live on the broader fringe, so close to 1 million near the rim. Narrow streets run through a town that lifted as the town that would need to leave fast. Modeling shows hours to empty the zone if an alarm went red, not minutes, and that is without a harbor that has risen and a quay that a quake can drop in seconds. The hazard now is not a distant ash cloud. It is the wall above your bed that hairlines a little more each month. Go back to a quieter place at dawn in Solfatara. The crater is a shallow bowl about 600 meters across, and steam drifts low over yellow sulfur stains. Boca Grande hisses a meter away, close enough to feel heat on your face at about 160 degrees. That is 60 beyond boiling, enough that guides once cooked fish in the draft. Carbon dioxide pours out there, and the flux has grown since 2005. Instruments track carbon monoxide to carbon dioxide ratios that move when deeper gas arrives. That is one of 3 lines INGV watches each week: uplift, seismicity, gas. It is plotted as colored bands where gray means about 10 millimeters a month and purple about 25. The right line climbs like stairs, not smooth, each step a swarm that adds a brick then pauses. The ground did not gain 4 feet in a night. It gained 4 feet in 20 years, which is a sheet of paper a day, almost nothing, until you stack 1,000 sheets to a hand. The Roman market did the same without instruments, sinking and rising with the sea as the columns prove. That crater breath in the morning is not drama, it is maintenance. A boy rides a scooter past the fence. A dog sleeps on warm ground near Pisciarelli. An old man opens shutters that no longer close flush because the frame twisted a few millimeters this year. He does not call it bradyseism, he calls it the house settling. He wedges paper under the door while keeping a bag by it. It is not packed to leave, but packed to wait in the car park. It holds water, papers, medicine, ready for a Friday bulletin that will say yellow again. He will look at the number, 10 millimeters a month, and think that is small. He will also remember the ruler on his kitchen wall, where his granddaughter marks height each birthday, 4 feet taller than she is, added under the street she walks to school. He will make coffee. The fumarole will keep hissing. That is the sound of yellow. Add it up again from the other side, because the caldera has done this before without blowing, and it can do it again. Yet the strain is not nothing. Laboratory work shows the crust above the reservoir is closer to failure than it was in 1984. Cumulative damage adds micro cracks that do not close. From 2021 to 2024, burst like swarms, clustered tighter each year, and focal mechanisms became more coherent. That means faults are organizing, and a ring fault that was indistinct is now thin and marked. Offshore, it was once hard to map. Now it is a line that quakes follow. That line can plausibly host magnitude 5, which is a step up from 4.7. A magnitude 5 releases about 2.8 times more energy than 4.7. That is the difference between cracked facades and collapsed walls over a wider patch. So the next record may not be a tenth, but a jump. The weekly bulletin will be your tell if you learn to read 3 things together, not 1. If uplift jumps from 10 to 25 millimeters a month and stays there, that is a paperback book a month under your feet. If carbon dioxide flux and temperature at Boca Grande jump together, that is heat on the move. If swarms deepen or migrate around the ring and away from the center, that is stress finding a new path. Any one alone is weather, all 3 together is change. The last time uplift accelerated to 30 millimeters a month was in 2022 to 2023. Then it eased as the system vented, which is the relief valve of the hydrothermal system. Valves can stick, and the work that traced failure in the cap, led by Kilburn, puts the window as years, not weeks. That is not comfort, because years is how long you live on yellow while the ground keeps its own calendar. End on new material, not a summary, and keep the last record in view. On June 30th, 2025, the magnitude 4.6 was called the strongest in 40 years, and on July 31st, 2026, the magnitude 4.7 took its place. Records will keep being set if uplift stays near 10 millimeters a month because the ring is loaded. The next record may be 4.8, it may be offshore. Offshore quakes couple to water and soft ground and shake Naples harder than a center quake would. Think what that does to the port you need when the alarm changes. A quay that rose 4 feet can be dropped in seconds by the quake that triggers the alarm. Ferries that should carry people to safety may already be diverted to Naples, which is the plan but also the bottleneck. The civil protection plan for the red zone must move about 500,000 people if the level goes to red. It runs along roads that narrow through Pozzuoli and onto the Cumana and Circumflegrei corridors that already paused for 6 hours after 4.7. The weekly bulletin on Friday will again say 10 or 15 millimeters. You will learn the colors as if they were weather: green, yellow, orange, red, with yellow feeling ordinary after 13 years. You will live above a market that sank and rose, under columns scarred by sea creatures that live only underwater, beside a crater that hisses at 160 degrees and a harbor that outgrew its depth. The ground rose 4 feet under your feet and it is still rising. A millimeter is small until you multiply it. The question to leave is not will it erupt, the question is how long a city can keep gaining height without gaining space for what that height breaks.